So I was wondering if we can talk about mindfulness of breathing in terms of what the Venerable Arittha has said mindfulness of breathing is. The mindfulness of breathing that he does in the suttas. So on one occasion the Blessed One asked, "Monks, do you develop mindfulness of in and out breathing?" And when this was said, Venerable Arittha replied to the Blessed One, "I develop mindfulness of in and out breathing, Lord. But how do you develop such mindfulness?" And Arittha replies, "Having abandoned sensual desire for past sensual pleasures, having done away with sensual desire for future sensual pleasures, and having thoroughly subdued perceptions of resistance with regard to internal and external events, I breathe in mindfully and I breathe out mindfully." So the Buddha says that there is that mindfulness of breathing. I don't say that there isn't, but as to how mindfulness of in and out breathing is brought in detail to its culmination, listen and pay close attention, I will speak. And then he goes in the classic description
of
in detail.
Right.
But so what I'm interested in is Arittha's mindfulness of in and out, his description.
Well, I think the bit to mention there is, I think some people might think that Arittha was wrong or something. That what he described is not correct mindfulness of breathing, and then the Buddha gave him the right one. But that's not what the Buddha says. He says, yeah, what you said is right. It is mindfulness of breathing, but it's not complete. Venerable Arittha's mindfulness of breathing can certainly helped him free himself from sensuality, factually. Because the Buddha didn't say, oh, you're not free from sensuality and that's not mindfulness of breathing which you described. He just said, that's fine, but let me give you the detail that results in culmination of that practice. So it's just not enough for arahantship. So like you need to go into a bit more detail, which then also makes you realize that Venerable Arittha described is sufficient to make you an anagami. So if you practice mindfulness of breathing, even in that simple sense that he described, which is, by the way, how every mindfulness of breathing formulation does start. Knowingly he breathes in, knowingly he breathes out. That's all you need to know. And if you stick to that, as Venerable Arittha did, you will overcome any desire towards the sensual pleasures now, of the past, for the future. In other words, you would have surmounted the entire domain of sensual craving, and most importantly, you would have completely subdued that patiga, resistance or aversion towards your own senses and so on that we spoke in previous videos. And that's obviously, as Venerable Arittha declared, enough for the 5 lower fetters to be destroyed. So for the complete arahantship, then the Buddha gives a further description of where you get, I don't want to give specific descriptions, because people are already way too much taking anapanasati to be a mechanical method. So that's why I think it's actually better if people follow Venerable Arittha's instruction first, because it will prevent you from falling into that mindless or whatever you've been doing, and force you to see things on the level of knowledge, of an enduring breath underneath your experience, like what we said before, regardless of the mind state, regardless of the emotional state, regardless of the physical state. That's why mindfulness of breathing brings satipatthanas to fulfillment. Mind state, emotional state, physical state. But if you start getting into these details, how I will breathe in like this, and I'll do this to the body formation, and I'll do this to the body formation, that will all become apparent if you become what Venerable Arittha is there. So if you overcome all the sensuality, subdue all the patiga you have towards your own senses, have no ill will towards anything or anyone in the world, past to future, then follow the rest of Anapanasati. then you will know exactly what it meant, how gladdening the body and experiencing joy while breathing in or breathing out. You know exactly what that means. But otherwise, people will be doing it with sensuality, with pretty much as something I shall do. They will result in even greater pleasure for me, greater experience. Any greatness of anapanasati on that level can only be developed on the basis of complete surmounting of sensuality and the 5 lower fetters. But that's what I mean. So in a way, it's a very good news. You don't need to worry about every single little step. If you cultivate and bring to fulfillment the knowledge of breathing in, breathing out, regardless of the posture, regardless of the emotional state, regardless of the mental state, regardless of the specific thoughts you're having, that is your anchor. That is underneath your experience. That is always enduring. And you don't lose sight of it.
The breath.
The knowledge of the breath being there, not I'm focusing on the physical side of it. You can focus on the physical side of it if you want, while you know that it's underneath you for what it is. That's really what the anchor is. So using the enduring breath that's already happening to you underneath your emotional states or mental states or physical states as an anchor, and investing effort to not lose the sight of it peripherally, to be aware. I don't need to stop doing what I'm doing in order to breathe, but I can certainly not allow myself to be too absorbed in what I'm doing so that I forget that I am breathing at the same time. So it's learning how to not overly commit to your focusing attention, and actually learn how to stretch your mind to see like these both ends simultaneously enduring. That's what Buddha would refer to, like, you develop samadhi, the mind becomes pliable and stretchy, not like a hard, twisted, knotted lump.
But so in his description, he goes beyond sensual pleasures, sensuality. So there's virtue and there's restraint, and he's putting up with the pressure. He's enduring the pressure, whether he's overcome the pressure or not. But even if he's putting up with the pressure, not giving in to sensuality, then he says subduing those perceptions of resistance, aversion. So, and as you're saying, so you give up all these sensual exploits, things calm down, and what you're left with is clearly seeing reality, the reality of your body.
But see, that reality will present itself first as this revulsion, as the suttas talk about, in the sense of you're going to experience almost like physical resistance, sickness, like a heroin addict withdrawing from the drugs or something. You are withdrawing from the domain of the entire sensual being. So it's going to be felt physically, but actually it's not. The physical aspect of it, the pain of that endurance, is your aversion towards it, towards the discomfort. But discomfort in itself, it's actually quite bearable if samadhi has been developed. That's like if a monk doesn't have the samadhi in that calming, in that proper sense, to use all the calming of the endurance, not to get rid of the endurance, or to paste pleasure over it. No, just to calm the aversion aspect of the same thing. And then, mind is can become absolutely boundless, limitless, in that sense, as light as you can imagine. The most agreeable form of experience within the same endurance, because it was your aversion that was making it heavy. And that's where the work is, in subduing the aversion, not in like psychologizing and trying to justify the purpose for endurance, or why you shouldn't do it, or you should do it, or why you should give in, or you shouldn't give in. All of that means you're still revolving around basically rooted in aversion. No, the pure aversion that you have towards the experience of non-sensuality, you have to abandon the aversion of it. The aversion towards your own senses that are not engaging with sensual distractions. And that's why the sensual distractions are so powerful. It's because the aversion underneath it, it's extremely strong. And the only mean of escape from it is towards sense desires.
And you're saying that's your first thing. So you're born, you feel, you experience the body, and your first act.
Yeah, that's what's meant by underlying tendencies. They're not there. The baby is not doing anything. The baby is not proliferating and choosing sensuality. But the baby its experience, its mind, is paired with the senses, with the five senses, and they are uncomfortable, however subtly. But there is nothing else there except that discomfort for an undeveloped mind, for a newborn mind. And what an unenlightened mind does, regardless of the type of discomfort it experiences, it wants to get rid of it. So naturally, on that fundamental level, when the baby is experiencing the discomfort of its newborn body and senses, it's just naturally going in the direction towards objects. Not that it chooses to, but the discomfort pushes it towards.
You say,
and then everything else it starts encountering in the world, the mother, breastfeeding, just becomes like a confirmation of that direction where it found safety from this discomfort that you yourself are, this unsafety. Because if you're just left with the senses for what they are, 5 wild animals in the world, and you realize that's what I am, there is nothing else to me. That's the reflections the Buddha would encourage to review this body, not for mechanically see what's anatomically made of. It's just to see that even the images of yourself you have are images of this bag of skin. And it's always any memory you have, and if it involves this bag of skin, these 5 senses, these organs existing there, and that's very unsafe. Like, other people have access to your senses more than you do, and that's why you're also averse towards others as well, through the same process of resistance.
But that seeing form, or your body, or the 6 senses, or the elements for what they are, means that you see them as uncomfortable or pressured weight,
pressure,
burden.
You will see them, practically speaking, you will see them as a pressure, but actually there is only pressure when you're seeing them with ignorance, which baby does, underlying tendency to avijja. It's not, if there was no avijja in baby's mind, it wouldn't have been a baby, it wouldn't have been born. That's the whole point. So that pressure, practically, yes, that's how you're going to see them, but actually that pressure is completely gone in another hand. So that pressure is the result of seeing them with not clearly, with aversion or with any other thing that you have not abandoned.
But if you do see them clearly,
and if you sustain the clarity, you will be unable to appropriate them, to own them, to even resist them in that sense, because even aversion towards them, it's kind of inconceivable if you clarify it sufficiently enough. So the aversion will fade.
So in terms of elements, 6 sense body, there is a fundamental discomfort. Not that you're averse to it.
Sure.
But there's a fundamental discomfort
to a degree.
of the body.
Yeah.
Being
of
body.
that form. Form, like the Buddha said, what is the nature of rupa is, or if you translate as form or matter, is nature of form is to deform.
Yeah.
That's just how it is. That is the nature of the body.
Which
elements are constantly like changing, reshaping, and your body is doing the same.
Elements. Yeah. And so that you cannot remove. You cannot just, and you can try and kill your body, and that doesn't work.
No,
you can
still
try
stay
and
within
control
the
the elements. It doesn't work.
Good luck.
So you have to kind of appease that.
Yeah.
That creature.
Yeah.
Appease those elements. Remember those the vipers.
The 4 great elements that you have to bathe and so on. Yeah. Well, exactly. You appease them by removing your aversion towards them. And it was the same. Just you reminded me now when you said the elements and so on. Like when a monk, or when the Deva, I think, was talking to a monk or to the Buddha, it was about reaching the end of the world, like travels across the universe to find the end of the elements. And the Buddha said, you doesn't matter how far you go, all you're going to find is elements. Like they're infinite in that sense. The ending of the elements is with this own body, when there is no more footing found in your consciousness for them. So when your consciousness when you cease to appropriate them, when you cease to have lust towards them or aversion towards them, they will cease. They will not pertain to you anymore. So then truly you reach the end of the universe.
Arittha is doing, subduing all perceptions of.
How do you do that? Well, by thoroughly developing sense restraint, and then guarding the doors of the sense faculties. doesn't mean refusing to see things or hear things, but means never doing so without being on guard. And that's often what people conflate. Like they think guarding the sense faculties means saying no to everything. I will not look at anything, hear anything, I will avoid, I will run away if I start hearing things. No. Guarding means you will have to see, hear, smell, taste, touch things. So keeping a close eye at the doorways of your senses, so guarding the sense faculties, that's the work. So now we're talking, I'm aware of what I'm seeing and so on. Say I hear something behind, I don't just look without thinking. You want to be aware of your, like if you want to look, of your faculty that you're looking, in case of what you see might induce lust in you or aversion in you. And that's what Buddha said. He keeps the guard of he guards his sense faculties, and then he doesn't give attention to any signs and features that arise within that. So say I heard something and I have an image of what that might be, and based on that image I'll decide whether I should look or not. And if I have to look, then I'll be extra careful so that when I do look, unwholesome states don't arise in me.
Right.
So it can sound like, I have to do a lot, but that's only because you haven't been guarding the senses properly. People, as I said, people confuse guarding with just refusing to see, refusing to look. No, you have to allow some degree of looking and seeing and smelling and tasting and touching. But you just always want to be on guard in regard to that.
Because if you were to kind of crush the body and keep it blind, or not let it hear anything, not let it eat basic amount of little bit of food, hurt the body,
torture it,
it's going to be agitated, just as agitated as it would be if you were to overindulge.
Exactly. So you want to calm these wild dogs. Well, you won't do by giving them what they want all the time, and you won't do by beating them and starving them either. It will make them even wilder more often than not. That level of torture. So you need to balance it, give them when needed, not unguarded, so they don't eat all of it or as much as they want. But, doesn't mean don't give them anything at all.
So I also read about this practice. It's called the element calming meditation. So for example, it would say earth samma meditation, earth calming meditations, and samma means to bring it back to equilibrium, whereby you're not agitating this element anymore. There is nothing that you do that agitates this form, these elements, this body. So the practice of samma, not samma as in the right. Samma as in tuned to the right note.
Where is that practice?
It's in when he's teaching Rahula how to do mindfulness of breathing.
Sure.
And he's teaching him how to subdue that patiga really by calming.
But that's the sutta about mindfulness of breathing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right.
How to do mindfulness of breathing in regard to the elements. So you're not doing anything that agitates.
Yeah. Practically speaking, people can see that for themselves. For example, when the body is fatigued and you're tired, you're irritated. So there is no reason for you, for example, to be irritated when the body is fatigued, when body is heavy, tired, where the solidity aspect, where the element of earth is felt more heavier, dragging you down or whatever else. But you are, because the mind is not developed in regard to the body. So that's why you can't just calm these elements abstractly. You can try, but that's not what the elements are. You are like the basis of elements, the body. They found a footing through your own misconceiving and so on. So when these elements change, when your body, and I don't mean just change in terms of aging or something, but even sometimes your body feels light, sometimes feels heavy, sometimes feels tired, sometimes feels energized, sometimes feels sleepy, sometimes awake, sometimes burning, sometimes cold. All of those, that's what elements are. So you train in regard to that, not in regard to what you perceive elements to be on account of your body, like elements and elements. that's you abstractly now just trying to go through the motions of that contemplation. No. So mindfully breathing in, knowingly you're breathing in, knowing you're breathing out underneath this body. What is that body that underneath which there is a breath? How is it felt? Is it tired? Is it heavy? Is it light? Is it aching? Those are the elements. Those are literally the things you need to develop your mind in regard to, and not because tired, I'm averse to that. Aching, I'm averse to that. Cold, I'm averse to that.
Restless.
Restless, too much, I'm averse to it. So it's like, oh, that's where aversion is. In regard to me and this body. Or my point of view in regard to this body. That's what would have meant, for as long as you're not developed in the body, you will be attracted to sensuality.
Not developed in the body, meaning...
Yeah, meaning you in regard to the body are not developed. Like you still have aversion in regard to the discomfort, and by extension of the same principle, you're going to have lust when you experience comfort. But it's actually in regard to the way the elements are at the time. And that's why the Buddha said there are all those asavas to be abandoned simply by enduring them correctly. Heat, cold, insects, discomfort, burning sun, and so on. Words of others, abuse of others, all of that is on the level of your body being factually assailed, because that's what body is, devoured. I mean, he said even the five senses are attacked by agreeable and disagreeable. Ears are attacked by agreeable and disagreeable sounds. That's the nature of it. That's just between them. That's not your problem. But your problem is to have lust towards agreeable and aversion towards disagreeable. So you don't. So you remove your lust towards it, you remove your aversion towards it, and then it won't be a problem. And that's the Arahant, who says everything that, all the taints to be removed, I have removed. The being, the sensuality, the ignorance. All that's left is the disturbances that can arise on account of this body until it breaks apart. Like this natural level of disturbances. So that's, you have to be careful if you want to be doing calming the elements, to not just go into visualizations and so on. Yeah. You can't calm the elements on your own terms, because they cannot be yours. You calm them by finding what state they are in now. Your body is your element. That's why it's often the same, same word, rupa for the body, rupa for the elements. That is your practical experience of the elements.
So bringing the elements to equilibrium. What does that mean that's what we're talking about now. But that's
right. Well, it means that. So if, like, say you might start with a fatigue. Naturally, to that extent, that's how elements present themselves. But through your unrestrained senses, you get tired even more unnecessarily. So you send the elements even further out of that, what they were naturally arisen. So you disturb them. You make it even worse. Or being too averse towards it, you feel even tired than you actually are. And then you can even come to the point that you're so averse now that physically you ceased to be tired, yet mentally you're just knackered because of your aversion, not because the elements were that.
Bringing them back to the natural state.
Seeing them for what they are arisen and not interfering with it, and enduring it without aversion, removing aversion towards the endurance of them, that's their natural state.
But even though their natural state is not peace and bliss and lovely and wonderful,
it's not dukkha either.
Yeah, exactly.
Dukkha is your interference, dukkha is your aversion, dukkha is your lust, dukkha is your craving. So yeah, that's important to understand. It's not like natural state of the elements is this, blissful mystical realm. No, I'm tired. Naturally, the body is tired, didn't eat enough, worked too much.
Yeah,
that is a currently natural state of these elements. All I need to do is not interfere with it and endure it mindfully.
But so then you're seeing the natural discomfort, the natural state.
Yes.
The natural uncomfortable state.
The natural uncomfortable state, which is not dukkha, but it's factually not nice.
But then a person can see the asubha there, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. Then it becomes obvious for what it is. You don't need to be making effort to see it. You recognize it for what it is. Oh, this is not beautiful. It's not worth, because it's in itself, in its natural state, it's a burden. It's a weight. And that's already not nice, not agreeable.
But also now, if you had to stop there, and
stop what?
Well, you could be quite disgusted with that.
Exactly, and that's and so if you are quite disgusted with it, means your aversion's taking over, not the natural state. Because the natural state has no aversion nor lust. Yet here you are full of aversion towards that. And that's the Buddha why he gave Anapanasati. Because some monks got too averse, thinking, oh, this body is truly like that, and they couldn't bear it. But actually, no, if you calm your mind, you realize, no, the body is uncomfortable to that extent. That's it. That's where it ends. So Arahantship Nibbana here and now is pleasant. It's very pleasant. Arahant's recognition of that discomfortable body in its clarity is the most pleasant experience you can imagine. It's the enlightenment. But if it's too disgusting, means okay. So you did probably remove the sensual perception sufficiently, but now you do need to remove your aversion of it as well, because that's not nibbana. That's not going to be nibbana.
So the work there, which I'm jumping,
and that's exactly what Venerable Arittha said that. First, it was the sensuality he abandoned, and what he was left was the disgust and aversion towards the body, the senses, and then he subdued that, and now he's just mindfully breathing in, breathing out. And
in another sutta, I think this is where it goes into what subduing of perceptions of patiga is, subduing that aversion. In the Rahula Sutta, where the Buddha is teaching him mindfulness of breathing, he goes, I think, from the asubha, realizing the asubha there, then practicing Brahmavihara, which culminates in upekkha, which is for the overcoming of all patiga.
Yeah, sure, that's the enlightenment.
So it's metta, karuna, contentment with the whole thing, mudita.
Exactly, because you don't need to be averse. That's what I'm saying. You realize aversion is coming from me completely unnecessarily. If I remove aversion, this discomfort will be blissful. So it's like, oh, and that's already the mind of friendliness already. So that's again, Brahmaviharas, another misconceived visualization practice, starts with a thorough watchfulness, guarding of the sense doors, sense restraint, and then that aversion you're left with, of that endurance for what it is, I'll be friendly to it. That's where you start with yourself. And then if through that state you think of others, you'll be friendly to any internal or external. Any shape or form, any perception of aversion that appears, I'll be friendly to it. I will sustain the mind of friendliness. That's all I'm protect that. Anything that comes to it and goes internally and externally, I shall sustain the mind of friendliness. That's my concern. Not to spread love to you, just to not lose the mind of friendliness in regard to any patiga that comes my way. And whenever you search the suttas, you will see that how to deal with patiga, loving kindness, metta.
Yeah, essentially.
But it's not like, sure, ill will towards others is a form of patiga, but that's not patiga. So you must have been well restrained before that. Your mind should have been withdrawn if you're particular concerned with hating this person or that person. To do Brahmavihara properly, they would culminate in upekkha. Because the monk, the diligent monk, sense restraint, virtue, sense restraint, guards the sense doors, then he abandons, he doesn't cultivate, he doesn't welcome thoughts of sensuality, of sensual desires, doesn't entertain, doesn't psychologize why I hate or why I have these thoughts. No, he simply does not give any attention to those thoughts until they are subdued. So thoughts of sensuality, thoughts of cruelty, harm, ill will, he subdued. Then thoughts about his reputation, concern about his reputation, thoughts about his home country or clans, these kind of higher extensions of self that everybody carries, what others see me and what they think. He subdues that as well. Not how he justifies it or he thinks about it. No, he subdues that. So he refuses to engage with his thoughts, and then what he is left with is the nature of things. That's another sutta that says that. So it's not like, these things will fall off no, he makes the effort to not engage with them because they'll try to hook you. Thoughts of sensuality will want you to think about it. Even in terms of asubha, you still accepted sensuality as a desire of a fact, and now try to get rid of it by thinking asubha. Thoughts of cruelty will try to hook you to take them, so to practice your Brahmavihara. As in, try to get rid of it. That's not Brahmavihara. So you need to be left with the clarity of that endurance that you inevitably going to be averse to. How much to? That depends on how much sensuality you had carried from before. And then, it's the pure patiga of this experience, internally, externally, that I should just be friendly towards. And if you're friendly to the patiga of your senses, you will be friendly to any patiga that comes through it. Even if people come and beat you up and abuse you, you cannot hate because you cannot abandon the doorway of friendliness towards this, through which all of this manifests for you. So that's why truly, like, metta practice will free you from all the patigha and result in upekkha. And if it's on that level, through sense restraint and watchfulness and guarding of the sense doors, you could just decide to be friendly towards this aversion, and sustain the friendliness regardless of the aversion, and aversion will be subdued. In the same sense, if you choose to sustain the knowledge of breathing underneath your experience, so to speak, breathing in, breathing out, your thoughts will be subdued. They will be calmed down. You don't need to, if I stick to this knowledge that I'm breathing in, breathing out while it is happening or whatever else, knowledge that breath is underneath there happening to me, in and out, and I don't completely lose the sight of it, thoughts will be subdued. That's just the natural outcome of it. Same, sustain the friendliness towards yourself in that sense of having been fully restrained, experiencing patigha of the sense restraint, just friendly towards that, nothing else, and patigha will subdue.
I mean, in the Rahula Sutta, again, that I was mentioning, after that subduing of patigha, he then says, develop the anicca sanya, to get rid of...
Well, that's the seeing things clearly. Like, you won't be seeing the clear, true meaning of that anicca, of that thing, because you're too averse towards it. So you subdue your aversion, what you're left is neither averse, certainly no sensual desire, and then, let me make the effort and see it as arisen on its own, inaccessible, not mine, what the suttas describe.
But the clarity is there.
Clarity, well, exactly, on the count of that clarity that you're not interfering with your aversion now, you get to specify aspects of it that you want to see, such as anicca, dukkha, and then the experience is fully going to be cessation of all the traces of conceit.
And then the Buddha actually, after that, then he starts to teach the mindfulness of breathing.
The rest of the mindfulness of breathing, That's what I mean, that's like the fulfillment. If you just then stick to that as a practice, if there are any traces of any appropriation, of any ignorance left that you are kind of unaware of, that will also disappear if you stick to that practice of that right order. Breathing in that impersonal sense, being unable to experience aversion anymore because you have subdued it, no sensual desire, and certainly no appropriation because then perception for nietzsche has been fully developed. Because there were, many like anagamis in the cases, they had so little traces of avijja left that even the Buddha could not specifically say where and how. He would just say, if there might be some residue, and if there is, there will be, non-return and so on. So that's why, even if you think you're an arahant, complete, finished, just stick to that practice because it's pleasant here and now. Cultivate anapanasati to that fulfillment, as he said to Venerable Arittha. And then, if there were any traces, that would have been dealt with by sticking to that practice of calming correctly. So it's a win-win, in other words. Even if you're an arahant, you win because it's a pleasant abiding here and now. And if you're not an arahant, you win because it's a pleasant abiding here and now, and it frees you from anything that was preventing you to be an arahant.
And but there's no breathing there. All that work, where's the breathing? Where's the breathing that you... There's also other work that you're doing. You're calming the patigha, you're contemplating this.
Breathing is that just peripheral recollection, the knowledge of the breath enduring underneath you. That's basically the reference point that prevents you from being too engaged from your personal point of view with which you're contemplating. Because if you're rooted in a naturally occurring breath underneath your experience, breathing in, breathing out, and refuse to give up,
give that basis up, basically.
Refuse to give, and that's already an impersonal reference point.
That impersonal reference point. That's why
eventually, if you stick to it, everything else will be seen through the impersonal reference point, not mine. That's exactly what not mine is, impersonal.
So when you contemplate the elements, when you contemplate the
through the impersonal basis of breathing, enduring there, you're contemplating it rightly. Through that impersonal basis of that thing which is so personal, so close to you. So close to you, yes. That's why it's a useful and suitable reference point. Because you could take other reference points, but they would be exactly. Sooner or later you end up appropriating them. So then it ceases to be an impersonal reference point through which you get to see all this personality and so on that's going on. Emotions and moods and that's Satipatthana. Satipatthana, principle Satipatthana, is impersonal reference through which you will purify everything from your gratuitous sense of personality. That's why it's for one way for purification of beings. There's nothing else to result in. Stick to Satipatthanas, and it will purify beings of personality, i.e. arahantship, in every shape or form, no matter how lingering, how subtle, if you do it sufficiently enough. And Anapanasati is the fulfillment of 4 Satipatthanas, nothing else. That's Anapanasati Sutta.